Welcome to Watch Symposium. I'm Austin. All right, so the girls are behind me doing some bike riding, or in the case of 4-year-old Sophie, some striding, and I think it's going pretty well. All right, so this is a paid question for Gregory. He writes, "Hi Austin, I've enjoyed your videos for some time now, but never actually desired a Rolex for myself. However, I've always wanted a GMT watch, and research for one always leads me back to Rolex. That, and I've recently become disillusioned with many other watches and watch companies." All right, so he's had some trouble with his watch. He continues, namely Seiko. Because at the end of 2019, I picked up the limited edition SRQ 031 chronograph with the 8R48 movement and have had awful timing results. The watchmaker I trust and go to regularly for my watches confirmed this and timed the watch at approximately minus 1 minute a week, or about -8 seconds a day. It loses time in all positions and consistently runs slow. There are certainly worse performing watches, but for the price I paid, I expected better. Absolutely, that watch retails for $1,500 USD, more or less. But anyway, that's why I steer clear of mid-tier watches, because they're not a whole heck of a lot better than sub $200 watches. So for me, sub $200 watches or over 5,000 USD watches. If he had thrown in a little bit more for a Grand Seiko, he wouldn't be having these accuracy issues, but live and learn. This brings me to my question. I've honed in on an Explorer 2 16570 black dial. Would you opt for one with the 3186 movement or the 3185? I've read that the 3186's jump hour click spring is prone to failure and can only be serviced by Rolex. All right, so I think you've read the same article that I have. That's a fantastic article, link in the description. It's by a watchmaker who compares the 3185 movement to the more modern 3186 movement. And yeah, that's very eye-opening. You would think that the improvements would be improvements all around, but he calls that into question. It turns out with the earlier 3185 movement, there was a wheel or a gear that was in charge of the date change, and they substituted that in the later 3186 for a relatively flimsy spring. And he posits that there are more chances for failure with that quote improvement. Well, it's not really an improvement. It's not, and that's the oddity about it, because Rolex is pretty famous for their workhorse movements that, you know, last reportedly decades without services. And so to substitute that wheel or that gear for the spring doesn't make much sense to me. Is that a case of planned obsolescence? Are they hoping that people will have date change issues and have to come crawling back to Rolex and they can make a buck? I don't think Rolex is that stupid, but I have no answer to why they incorporated an inferior part. As far as your question, can only be serviced by Rolex, those are relatively modern pieces, so I wouldn't be having them serviced by anybody but Rolex. But yeah, I guess down the road, 50 years down the road, that could be an issue when Rolex stops servicing them and they run out of parts. Yeah, but for now, it's sort of a moot point. What I'm concerned about is whether the movement is going to be as robust in the long term. Okay, and so that's the advantage over the advantage of the 3185 over the 3186. But the 3186 movement has the blue parachrome spring that's going to be more resistant to magnetization. So if the specter of magnetization haunts you, then the 3186 movement might be the way to go. It's kind of a shame because you have to sort of pick your poison. I mean, do you want to be more concerned with magnetization or potential date change issues? Now, for me, I've worn my 3185 movement Explorer 2 everywhere, through airports, x-ray machines. It's kind of my go-to watch when I think, yeah, magnetization issues might come into play. And I've never had a problem. I had it checked out, had the seals checked before I went to Thailand about a year ago, and they checked whether it was magnetized or not, and it hadn't been. So the draw for the blue parachrome spring for me isn't there. You know, you get some bragging rights with the blue parachrome spring because it's newer, but again, it comes at the cost of potential date change issues. So hopefully the modern GMT movements, I want to say that's the 3287 movement, is just better all around, and you don't have to sort of pick your poison. So for me, I think the 3185 movement is the one that I would go to. And I used to think that the 3185 movement was sort of my grail. You know, a GMT Master 2 16710, late Z serial, M serial, with the 3186 movement. That was a grail. But then I read this article and it was like, you know, I don't want a watch with a weaker part. So it sort of cured me of that. And it was kind of nice to realize you kind of already have your grail. So that's your call. Are you more worried about magnetization or potential date change issues? I will say that if you're like me, you're not going to experience any magnetization issues. But I think your other concerns will dictate whether you're going to get a 3185 or 3186 movement. Prefer drilled lugs or no? All right, so a holes case or a no holes case. And yeah, I prefer holes cases, and I think they look cooler, yes, but that's only about 10% of it. You know, I think they have that vintage look, and I love that, but really 90% of the reason I like them more than the no holes cases are the functionality, because you can change straps easily. You don't need a special tool. You can use just a toothpick, and you can check the serial number, and you can check the reference number on your watch easily. You can take off the bracelet to clean it or put it in an ultrasonic cleaner. And one of my favorite things is when you put that bracelet back on, you have that visual confirmation that those spring bars are perfectly seated. I've put on watches with no holes cases, and I've thought those spring bars were perfectly seated. The watch came off. You know, that's a nightmare situation with a Rolex. So I love being able to tell that it's secure. So I've always opted for the holes cases. But here in Japan, the no holes cases I think are more desirable because they're new, and you know, newer things are more desirable here among the population. And I think it's got a fancier look. If you're not planning to change out your bracelet or check your serial number or use an ultrasonic cleaner for your bracelet, and you know, I guess it's not an issue, but yeah, I much prefer the functionality. I think there are clear advantages to having a holes case. Solid end links versus hollow end links. Okay, so he wants to know about which I would go for. Unlike holes case versus no holes case, there's no advantage to going for hollow end links. All right, so I would certainly go for solid end links. You know, many people will say that the hollow end links are more rattly, and I guess that's the case. If the hollow end links become loose, that can happen, but for me, it's been a non-issue. They sound exactly the same. In practice, on the wrist, I can tell no difference. There's no difference whatsoever. But yes, on down the road, if those hollow end links get bent or any, you know, they can kind of warp and not sit flush to the case, and that can be kind of annoying, or they can rattle. Again, hasn't been an issue for me yet, but it could be in the future. Now, for me, what really matters is when you're taking the bracelet on and off, because the solid end links are attached to the bracelet, and that's great because you put on a NATO and you have the bracelet and the end links in one piece, all right? Whereas with the hollow end links, you have the bracelet and then the hollow end links are separate. They're not connected. And so you're wearing your NATO and you've got three pieces. You got the bracelet and the two hollow end links that you have to keep track of, and that's annoying. So definitely I would go for solid end links. But you know, when you're wearing the watch on the wrist, personally speaking, there's no difference to me between the hollow end link bracelets and the solid end link bracelets. Ask me in 10 years or 20 years and when that thing is rattling like crazy, and I might change my tune. But the solid end link pieces will hold their value probably a little bit more because I think they're more desirable, at least in a place like Japan. How important is having box and papers if you're buying from a respected dealer? It's always good to have box and papers. It's always satisfying to have a full set, and it'll make your watch, more collectible, more sellable in the future. A lot of people won't even consider pieces without, box and papers. So if you're planning to flip your watch in the future, you need to get out of it. Having a full set is going to be kind of nice. For me, if I look at a piece, a relatively recent piece, 3, 4, 5 years old at a gray market dealer, and it doesn't have a box or papers, I always sort of question, what's up with that piece? What happened to the box? What happened to the papers? Is it a legit piece? Is it stolen? A lot of times when watches go missing, when they're stolen or lost, they just come straight off the wrist. And so if that watch winds up at a gray market dealer, it's going to not have box and papers. And so I always wonder, I'm a little bit more suspicious of non-box and papers pieces, okay? And my first piece, the 14060 no date sub, was watch only. And I was really concerned about that. And I always thought, what happened to the box? And more so, what happened to the papers? And was this taken off somebody's wrist? Is this a stolen watch that I've just bought? And, I wasn't fully satisfied until I took it to RSC to have some work done on it. And when you do that, they run the numbers, and, you're always happy when your watch comes back and it, is not reported as a stolen watch. And gray market dealers don't have access to whether these watches are stolen or not. They don't have access to that stolen watch database that Rolex has. And so it's a concern when I'm buying on the pre-owned market, and having the box and papers pieces just gives me a little bit more assurance. I can picture the watch being sold by the original owner or whoever got it through the proper channels, just getting the box and the papers together and them going with the watch instead of, it being a watch that was found or ripped off somebody's wrist or whatever. So, but as far as actually, passing up, it depends on the piece, really, is what I would say, because, if you're going for a 16570 3185 and you're not worried about a polished piece, would just, make sure you get one with box and papers, okay? There are plenty out there. If you have your sight set on a specific piece, like one that I found recently, a really well-priced 3186 movement random serial, that's 2011, last of the last, Explorer 40 millimeters with engraved rehaut and relatively rare thin frame dial. It was unpolished. It is unpolished. I know where it is. Let me know if you want to buy this piece. I kind of passed up on it. I thought about it, but I was shopping for Matt Stevens, and he passed on this piece, and I thought, this is excellent. So should I get this? But anyway, it's a non-polished piece, box, full set of links, but no card. Now, that's still worth getting. And if you hold out for the same thing, non-polished, but one with papers as well, you'll be waiting forever. You'll never find it. So that's worth jumping on. So it really depends on the piece. Now, if I did get that watch, I would probably take it to RSC at some point, and I'd get the service papers. And that would be good enough. Not as good as the original card, but yeah. So I would say, if you're just going for a generic 3185 or even a 3186 movement, and you're not worried about a polished piece or not, or a non-polished piece, just go for the full set, okay? Because there are plenty out there. It's when you start looking for things like non-polished pieces or thin frame dials that you might need to make the compromises. Lastly, I know you prefer the white dial, but I personally dislike white dials. I'm open to hearing why I should choose the white dial, though. You shouldn't. You should choose the black dial because you like it more. Why do I like the white dial? Well, first of all, I love white dialed watches. I love the clean look. It's got a cool nickname, the Polar, and it always reminds me of snow and the snow on Mount Everest. And there's a connection between Mount Everest and climbing Mount Everest and the Explorer 2. So it's got that persona of snowy adventure for me, and that's why I love it. As far as more tangible reasons why you might want it, it's a little bit more desirable than the black dial version. They go for a little bit more. And, you know, I think when you're going for a 16570, then, you know, one of the reasons you go that route is so you can get that beautiful white dial. And you know, as far as the professional adventure watches, and I use the term adventure watches to draw a distinction between just professional watches, because, you know, the Milgauss is a professional watch, but it's not what I would call an adventurer's watch. They had a white dial version. But as far as the adventure watches, the GMT, the Sub, the Deep Sea, the Sea Dweller, the Explorer 2, there's only one with a beautiful white dial, and that's the Explorer 2. And so I think it's kind of special in that sense. All right, I'll leave you with this, Gregory. Thanks again for the question. Now, if I were you and I had tons of money to play with, since you like the black dialed Explorer 2, I would consider going for a GMT Master 2, okay? Because they only come in black dialed versions. I'm talking about like a 16710, and it's really a better watch, okay? It's more iconic. I think it's a better looking watch. You get the functionality of the movable bezel that makes the GMT function more usable, and you can use it as a timing bezel like a Sub, and you can get an Oyster bracelet for that watch or a Jubilee bracelet. You can change out the different bezel inserts, get a Pepsi or an all black or a Coke. That watch, between the bezel inserts and the different bracelets, has 6 different looks, and it's a great watch. It probably will, I don't want to say it will hold its value more. I think they'll both hold their value. I think it's a more collectible piece. It's got a better reputation. It's just an all-around cooler watch. Basically, the GMT Master 2 is better in every way than an Explorer 2, except for the dial, right? And you don't want that white dial. So if you got the money, and the money is the reason why you don't want to go for the GMT Master 2, because it's going to be twice as much money. But if you do have the money, I would consider springing for the GMT. If you're a one-watch guy and it's going to last you, I think that's the way I would do it. That's the way I did do it, all right? So the one advantage I would say of the three, I keep calling it the 3186 or the 3185. The 16570 is the fixed bezel, and that can be a little stronger, less fiddly, but comes at a cost. You know, it's just, there's less functionality there. All right, Gregory, so if you've agreed with what I've said, then the sweet spot for you is going to be a watch, an Explorer 2, with a holes case and solid end-link bracelet. And so that's going to nix any chance of getting a 3186 movement Explorer 2, all right? But again, my recommendation, I think, would be the 3185 movement. So for you, you're going to be looking at watches from the year of late 99 until early 2002, all right? So late A serials, P, K, and early Y serial Explorer 2s. And that's going to give you a Swiss-made dial with a superluminova, no tritium. It's going to give you the solid end links, which they incorporated in the latter part of 1999 during the A serial. And it's going to give you a holes case, which they did much earlier, up until late 2002. All right, so there you go. Good luck. Thanks for watching. Let me know what you think. See you next time.